What if everything you believed about getting old was wrong? Ruth whispered to herself as the screen froze once again. The video call with her grandson had been choppy for minutes, the little boy's eager face flickering in and out like a ghost on her laptop screen. "Why can't this just work?" she muttered, tapping the mouse helplessly. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from age, but from frustration. At 68 years old, Ruth felt as though she was standing on the outside of a world that had long since sped past her. The old rotary phone on the kitchen wall suddenly felt like a relic from another lifetime. In this quiet farmhouse in rural Iowa, the internet was patchy at best, and her attempts to stay connected to the people she loved were fading into static. Just yesterday, she had tried to join an online knitting group her daughter had recommended. The screen lagged so badly, she gave up after 5 minutes. "Maybe I'm too old for this," she thought, swallowing the lump rising in her throat. The thought gnawed at her, that maybe this new, digital world was no place for someone like her. Maybe it was time to accept her shrinking role, to withdraw gracefully into the shadows of time. Then, a headline caught her eye as she scrolled through the news on her outdated phone: Elon Musk's Starlink project promises high-speed internet for every corner of America. The words felt like a beam of light cutting through the gloom of her doubts. Elon Musk, a name she'd heard whispered in headlines about rockets, electric cars, and space missions, was now bringing the internet to places just like hers. A smile flickered across Ruth's face. Could this be the answer? Could this be the spark she needed? Her mind flashed back to a moment a few days earlier when she had watched a viral clip of Elon Musk speaking at a conference. His voice was steady, confident, almost urgent. "When something is important enough," he had said, "you do it even if the odds are not in your favor." Ruth paused, repeating the phrase in her mind. What if it wasn't too late for her? What if she, too, could find a way to adapt, to thrive, and to reconnect with the world? But even as hope stirred, a voice of caution whispered back, "Isn't this just another thing you'll fail at? You're not a tech person anymore." That night, Ruth sat in her dimly lit kitchen, the hum of the old refrigerator the only companion. She stared at the glowing screen of her laptop, the cursor blinking as if urging her to try again. Outside, the wind rustled the cornfields, and somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted. She thought about her grandson's laughter, the warmth of family dinners long past, and the emptiness she felt now. The world was moving fast, and she felt left behind. Yet, within that silence, a small voice whispered, "Maybe you're not done yet." The next morning, the local community center announced the arrival of a Starlink installation for the town's internet access. Ruth's heart leapt. This was more than a news story now, it was real. She signed up for the first workshop teaching residents how to use the new service. Walking into the small hall, surrounded by people half her age, she felt a flicker of nervousness but also a surge of determination. As the instructor showed how the satellite dish connected to the sky and brought internet to their homes, Ruth's eyes sparkled with possibilities she hadn't dared to imagine in years. What if she could finally see her grandson's face clearly? What if she could join those online groups and share her stories? What if she could learn something new, even at 68? As the weeks passed, Ruth set up her own Starlink dish on the edge of her porch, the sleek white satellite pointing skyward like a beacon of hope. The first time she clicked connect and watched the connection speed soar, she felt an electric thrill run through her. The world was suddenly at her fingertips again. She video called her grandson, and for the first time in months, his giggles came through crystal clear. Tears blurred her vision. The moment it all changed wasn't a grand event or a life-altering decision, it was a flicker of connection, a link restored between hearts across the miles. That night, Ruth posted her first message in an online forum for seniors learning new technology. "I'm 68 and just got Starlink. Feels like the future is finally here for me. Anyone else out there feeling like this could be a new beginning?" The replies came swiftly, stories of struggle, hope, and rediscovery. Ruth felt something she hadn't in a long time, belonging. Elon Musk wasn't just a distant figure building rockets and electric cars. His vision was a catalyst, a symbol of rebellion against limits imposed by age, fear, and circumstance. She realized that the spark had never been outside her, it had been inside, waiting for permission to ignite. Her neighbors, once skeptical, started asking her for help with their own devices. Ruth became a quiet guide, a symbol of possibility. She wasn't invisible anymore. The fear of fading away was replaced by the excitement of rediscovery. The future wasn't a place to fear but a place to meet again. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Ruth typed in the forum, feeling the warmth of community and the pull of new horizons. As the screen filled with answers, hope, love, purpose, and determination, she smiled and thought, maybe this was just the beginning. The moment it all changed was here, and it was hers. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Before the spark of Starlink and the flicker of a new connection, Ruth's life felt like a slow retreat into shadows. For decades, she had been a schoolteacher in the same small Iowa town where she was born, her days filled with lesson plans, chalk dust, and the laughter of children. But as the years passed, her classroom emptied and her own family scattered like leaves in the wind. Her husband, Tom, had passed away 10 years earlier, leaving behind an empty chair at the kitchen table and a silence that wrapped around her like a heavy blanket. Her 2 children moved to cities far away, caught up in their busy lives, leaving Ruth in the quiet house with more rooms than memories. The phone calls became less frequent. The letters stopped coming. She felt like a ghost in her own home, a relic of a past that no longer mattered. Ruth's hands, once steady and sure when guiding children's fingers to write their first words, now trembled slightly with arthritis. Her eyes, sharp enough to grade papers in her prime, strained to see the tiny print on medication bottles. The mirror in the bathroom reflected a woman whose face told stories of joy and loss, but whose spirit seemed dimmed, as if worn thin by the passing years. Her days blurred into each other, waking up to the same quiet house, sipping coffee on the porch while watching the cornfields sway under endless skies, waiting for something she couldn't name. The television was her companion most evenings, but the programs felt distant and fast, filled with people younger and busier than she felt she could ever be again. Loneliness crept in like an uninvited guest, filling the spaces between memories and dreams deferred. Ruth often found herself lost in thought, wondering where the years had gone and why she felt so invisible now. She thought about her missed chances, the trip to Europe she and Tom never took, the stories she never wrote down, the friendships she let slip away. Most painful of all was the distance growing between her and her children, the conversations that ended with "we'll talk soon," promises that never came. One particular memory haunted Ruth. It was a summer evening, 20 years ago, when Tom had surprised her with a picnic by the lake. They sat on a blanket beneath a sprawling oak tree, watching the sun dip below the horizon in fiery reds and oranges. Tom had held her hand, promising adventures and dreams that felt endless then. Ruth had believed they had forever. That moment was a snapshot in time, a symbol of the life she once had, full of possibility and love. Now, that memory was a bittersweet reminder of all that had slipped through her fingers like water. She kept the faded photograph in a worn album, often turning its pages late at night when sleep refused to come. Friends had drifted away too. Some moved on, others succumbed to illnesses or the slow fade of age. The neighborhood felt emptier each year. Sometimes, Ruth would walk slowly past the vacant houses on Main Street, imagining the laughter and stories that once filled those walls. The town itself was changing, shuttering shops and schools, the lifeblood of community draining away. It was hard to hold on when everything around her seemed to be letting go. In those moments, she questioned her own place in the world. Was she a relic? A forgotten chapter? The fear that her best days were behind her settled like a stone in her chest. Despite the creeping despair, Ruth clung to small rituals that gave her life meaning. She tended to her garden each morning, coaxing stubborn blooms from the soil with gentle hands. She baked pies using recipes passed down from her mother, the aroma filling the house with warmth and memories. She wrote letters she never sent, pouring her heart onto paper in the hope that somewhere, someone would hear her unspoken words. But deep down, she longed for something more, a sign that she still mattered, that her story wasn't finished. Technology was another hurdle. Ruth remembered the frustration of trying to use a smartphone her daughter gave her for Christmas a few years ago. The tiny screen, the endless apps, and constant updates overwhelmed her. She felt clumsy, inadequate, and out of step with a world that seemed designed for younger hands and sharper eyes. Social media was a mystery, online banking a risk too confusing to take. She watched her grandchildren's faces light up as they talked about video games and online videos, wishing she could join them but feeling trapped by the barriers she couldn't climb. The internet was a distant concept, a bridge to the future that felt closed to her. But all that was before the news of Starlink. Before the idea that a satellite in the sky could change everything. Before she realized that maybe, just maybe, the story of her life wasn't finished but entering a new chapter. The memory of that evening by the lake with Tom, once a symbol of lost dreams, transformed in her mind. It became a promise, that life was full of new possibilities if she was willing to reach for them. That aging didn't mean fading away but opening doors to discoveries she hadn't yet imagined. As she sat by the window, watching the world outside move in ways she struggled to keep up with, Ruth felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in years, hope. It was fragile and tentative, like the first bloom of spring after a long winter, but it was there. And with that hope came a quiet resolve. The past was a foundation, not a cage. She might have lost some battles to time, but the war for meaning, connection, and purpose was far from over. Ruth's story was one of many in small towns across America, places where the promise of progress often felt out of reach. The slow internet, the fading communities, the isolation, they were challenges that seemed insurmountable to people her age. But they were also the very reasons why change mattered most. Because behind every closed door and silent phone was a person yearning to be seen, to be heard, to be connected. Ruth carried within her the weight of all those unspoken stories, stories waiting for a spark to bring them back to life. And that spark was coming from the sky. Ruth sat quietly in her living room, the dim afternoon light casting long shadows across the worn carpet. Her mind was a battlefield, a swirling storm of doubt, fear, and flickering hope. Is it too late? The question haunted her, echoing louder with each passing day. The promise of Starlink, of finally connecting with the world, teased her like a distant melody she wanted to believe in but feared to trust. She had spent years retreating, convinced that technology and progress were for the young, for the fast-moving. Now, confronted with a chance to step forward, she found herself trapped in an inner war between wanting to change and fearing failure. Her children called less often, their voices polite but distant. "Mom, you need to slow down," her daughter said during their last phone call. "You don't have to keep trying to do everything." It was said with love, but to Ruth, it felt like a quiet dismissal. Maybe they think I'm done, she thought bitterly. She remembered the doctor's last visit, how he gently advised her to take it easy, reminding her that at her age, slowing down was wise. The words settled like a weight. Slow down. Step back. Accept your place. It felt like an invisible cage tightening around her spirit. Outside, the world seemed indifferent. The grocery clerk barely looked up when she asked for help with her online coupon. The young neighbor rolled her eyes when Ruth asked for advice on setting up a new app. Society had its unwritten rules about aging, quiet, compliant, fading away gracefully. Ruth had spent years internalizing those rules, but the spark from Elon Musk's Starlink announcement challenged everything she believed. Elon Musk, the man behind rockets shooting to Mars, cars that ran on batteries, and now satellites beaming internet from the stars, was defying limits. Age, failure, fear, all dismissed by relentless determination. His voice, captured in podcasts and interviews, cut through the noise of her doubts. When something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor, he had said. Ruth clung to that phrase, repeating it like a prayer. Yet, the fear persisted. She imagined herself fumbling with complicated devices, the inevitable embarrassment of asking for help, the disappointment if she failed again. She thought of the years lost, the energy drained, and the quiet nights spent alone. What if this is just another thing I can't do, she wondered. The war inside her raged with every step she hesitated to take. The pull of isolation was strong, but so was the faint, insistent call of possibility. One evening, Ruth turned on the television and stumbled upon a local news segment about the Starlink project's rollout in her county. The reporter spoke with excitement about how this technology could bridge the digital divide, reaching places where cables and towers never went. Ruth saw familiar faces on the screen, neighbors, friends, all struggling with the same frustration she felt every day. A man in his 70s spoke about how he never thought he'd be able to video chat with his grandchildren, but now he could see their smiles clearly. Tears pricked Ruth's eyes. This wasn't just a story about technology. It was a story about reclaiming connection, about breaking through the barriers that time and circumstance had built. That night, she sat at her kitchen table, the glow from her laptop screen illuminating the lines on her face. She found an Elon Musk interview on YouTube where he spoke about overcoming failure, about the importance of persistence, and about imagining futures others said were impossible. It's not about age, he said, it's about mindset. Fear holds us back more than anything else. Ruth paused the video and stared at the screen. Mindset. Fear. Two words she had wrestled with her entire life. Could she shift hers now? The next day, the community center announced free workshops to help residents set up Starlink. Ruth wanted to go but felt a familiar hesitation. What if I'm the only one who can't keep up, she worried. Still, the pull was stronger than the fear. She made a decision to attend, even if it was just to watch and listen. At the center, she saw faces she recognized, some confident, others as uncertain as she was. The instructor, a young tech enthusiast named Marcus, spoke patiently and encouragingly, breaking down the complex setup into simple steps. Ruth's heart beat faster as she learned about how Starlink satellites connected in space, creating a web of signals reaching even the most remote corners. During a break, Ruth asked Marcus if she could try setting up a demo dish. His eyes lit up. Of course. Let's do it together. She fumbled at first, the unfamiliar cables tangling in her hands. Marcus smiled, offering gentle guidance without judgment. For the first time in a long while, Ruth felt the thrill of discovery. The connection speed surged as the dish linked with satellites overhead. The internet, once a distant and daunting concept, was suddenly tangible and within reach. Returning home that evening, Ruth set up the small white dish on her porch, pointing it skyward as the instructions had shown. The hum of the equipment was a quiet song of possibility. When the connection bar on her laptop filled to full strength, a wave of triumph swept through her. She called her grandson again. This time, his face appeared clearly, his laughter ringing without interruption. The tears she had held back spilled freely. This was more than technology, it was a bridge between worlds, a chance to reclaim the relationships time had threatened to sever. But even as hope blossomed, the inner war wasn't over. Ruth's neighbors were skeptical. Why bother, one said. You're too old to learn all that new stuff. Her son called again, cautioning her against getting carried away. The voices from the outside world tried to pull her back into doubt and resignation. Yet, every time she thought of Elon Musk's words, every time she saw the clear face of her grandson on the screen, she fought back. I am not done, she told herself. I can still change. I still matter. The battle between fear and courage played out daily. Some mornings, Ruth woke feeling overwhelmed, questioning if she could keep up with the rapid pace of change. Other days, she marveled at how far she had come, each successful video call and blog post a small victory. She started writing about her journey online, sharing her struggles and breakthroughs with others in her community and beyond. The response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from seniors feeling the same mix of hope and fear, from people inspired by her courage. For the first time in a long while, Ruth felt part of something bigger than herself. Her story spread slowly, like a gentle ripple. Local news invited her to speak about her experience. At community gatherings, neighbors asked her for tech advice, and Ruth discovered a new purpose, not just to connect herself, but to help others find their way. The inner war transformed into a quiet resolve. She wasn't just fighting for connection, she was fighting for dignity, for relevance, for the chance to matter again. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ruth sat on her porch with her laptop, the Starlink dish humming softly nearby. She thought about the long years of struggle, the moments of loneliness, and the small victories that had rekindled her spirit. She realized that the war inside her was not just about technology or age, it was about belief. Belief in herself, in the power of change, and in the unyielding spark of hope that refuses to be extinguished. Elon Musk's vision was more than rockets and satellites, it was a call to challenge limits, to push beyond fear, and to embrace the future with courage. The war was far from over, but Ruth had already won the most important battle, she had chosen to fight. And in that choice, she found a new kind of freedom, the freedom to dream again, to connect, and to live fully, no matter her age. Ruth woke early that morning with a clarity she hadn't felt in years. The inner war that had raged in her mind was beginning to quiet, replaced by a steady determination. She realized that the small but bold choice she had been avoiding was now within reach. Inspired by Elon Musk's relentless push to defy limits and fueled by the spark of possibility from Starlink, she decided she would no longer wait for permission to matter. Today, she would take her first real step toward reclaiming her life. She started with something simple but powerful. Every morning, she would walk. Not aimlessly, but with purpose. Out into the crisp Iowa air, through the quiet streets of her town, past the field stretching wide under the early sun. The walk wasn't just exercise, it was a declaration, a reclaiming of agency and vitality. At first, her legs protested, the stiffness reminding her of years spent more in chairs than on her feet. But she pushed through, feeling the pulse of life return with every step. The neighbors, some curious and others skeptical, began to notice Ruth's morning ritual. She smiled and nodded as she passed by, feeling a connection even in these brief exchanges. It was a small but meaningful way to reinsert herself into the community she feared losing. The next bold choice came when Ruth decided to open a blog. She had watched her grandchildren effortlessly navigate social media, sharing photos and stories with friends across the world. Ruth, once wary of technology, now saw it as a bridge rather than a barrier. Sitting at her kitchen table, with her laptop glowing before her, she typed her first post, "I'm 68 and learning to connect again. This is my journey with Starlink and rediscovering hope." Writing felt vulnerable, raw, but also exhilarating. She shared the loneliness she'd endured, the doubts that haunted her, and the small victories that sparked new life within her. The post wasn't perfect, her typing was slow, and sometimes the words stumbled awkwardly, but it was hers. Within hours, messages of encouragement poured in from readers she'd never met but who understood her story. The blog became a lifeline, a space where Ruth could voice her truth and find community beyond the borders of her small town. With renewed energy, Ruth turned her attention to the garage, a place that held decades of dust-covered memories and unfinished projects. One afternoon, inspired by Elon Musk's example of building, inventing, and creating, she pulled out an old woodworking kit she had shelved years ago. Her hands, though unsteady at times, began to shape wood with a focus and joy she hadn't known in years. The project was modest, a simple birdhouse, but to Ruth, it was a symbol of rebuilding and creating anew. As the structure took shape, neighbors stopped by, curious about her work. Some offered tools or advice, others just words of encouragement. Ruth felt a sense of purpose that filled the empty corners of her life. One of the most difficult but transformative steps came when Ruth reached out to her estranged son, Michael. Years of silence had built walls between them, walls made of misunderstandings, distance, and unspoken regrets. But the vulnerability she had embraced through her blog and newfound connection gave her courage. One evening, she sent him a message through the blog's contact form, a simple note: "I miss you. I'm trying to change. Can we talk?" The waiting that followed was agonizing, each day stretching longer than the last. Then, unexpectedly, a reply arrived. Michael wrote back with hesitation but also hope. Over the next weeks, messages turned to phone calls, and phone calls turned into visits. The old wounds began to heal, stitch by stitch. Ruth realized that change wasn't just about technology or physical activity, it was about mending the broken parts of her heart. Each choice Ruth made, though small in itself, reignited a flame inside her. She felt herself growing stronger, more alive. The fear that had once chained her to a life of quiet resignation loosened its grip. Elon Musk's relentless defiance of limits had shown her that the biggest barriers were often those we placed on ourselves. Ruth wasn't just adapting to change, she was leading it in her own way. With her new internet connection from Starlink, Ruth began sharing her journey beyond her blog. She started a virtual book club, connecting seniors from towns miles apart who longed for friendship and intellectual stimulation. The group's weekly meetings filled her calendar and brought laughter, debate, and companionship into her days. Ruth became a beacon of hope and proof that it was never too late to learn, grow, and connect. One afternoon, while walking home from a book club meeting, Ruth paused on the edge of the town square and looked up at the sky where the Starlink satellite silently orbited. She thought about how a man thousands of miles away had launched these tiny machines to bring light and connection to places like hers. She felt grateful not just for the technology but for the idea that no corner of the country should be left behind, no matter the age or location of its people. The transformation wasn't always smooth. There were days when doubts crept back, when frustration with technology flared, or when loneliness whispered at the edges. But Ruth had learned to lean into those moments, to remind herself that change was a journey, not a destination. Each step forward, each connection made, was a victory over the fear that once held her prisoner. As the months passed, Ruth's story reached beyond her town. Local news stations featured her blog and her community efforts. Letters arrived from strangers thanking her for inspiring them to embrace change in their own lives. Ruth was no longer invisible. She was a symbol of possibility, a living testament to the power of courage, persistence, and connection. One evening, as she prepared dinner, her phone buzzed with a video call. It was Michael, smiling brightly on the screen. Behind him, she could see her grandson, waving excitedly. "Look, Grandma," he shouted. "We're connected." Tears filled Ruth's eyes as she realized that the one thing she had changed wasn't just her internet connection or her daily habits, it was her willingness to believe in herself again. That belief had transformed her world and the lives of those around her. In the quiet of her home, surrounded by the sounds of life and connection, Ruth whispered, "I was never too old. I was just waiting for permission to matter again." The Starlink dish outside continued to hum softly, a symbol not just of technology, but of hope, renewal, and the endless possibility of new beginnings. The morning sun poured through the windows of Ruth's kitchen as she sat at the table, laptop open, heart pounding with anticipation. Today wasn't just another day, it was the day everything she had struggled with, loneliness, doubt, and the slow fading of purpose, began to crack open. Her story, shared in humble blog posts and quiet conversations, had unexpectedly gone viral. Messages flooded in from across the country, some from seniors who felt invisible, others from younger people inspired by her courage to change at any age. She read each one with trembling hands, overwhelmed by the outpouring of connection. For years, Ruth had lived in the shadows, her voice lost amid the noise of a fast-moving world. Now, it was being heard. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. One evening, a major news outlet reached out to interview her about her journey with Starlink and her online community of seniors rediscovering connection. The interview aired during prime time, introducing Ruth's story to millions. She watched herself on the screen, her voice steady but filled with raw emotion, telling the story of a woman who refused to be left behind. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she spoke about the power of hope, the courage to embrace change, and the determination to matter again. Viewers responded with an outpouring of support, sharing their own stories and thanking her for giving voice to a generation often overlooked. The viral moment didn't just bring attention, it brought transformation. Ruth's inbox filled with invitations to speak at events, participate in community programs, and collaborate on initiatives aimed at bridging the digital divide for seniors. Her once quiet life became a beacon of possibility, proof that it was never too late to rewrite your story. But beneath the public success, Ruth faced a deeply personal breakthrough, the healing of relationships long fractured by distance and silence. After years of missed birthdays and half-hearted phone calls, her son Michael came to visit. The reunion was tentative at first, each word carefully chosen, each glance heavy with years of unspoken regret. But as they sat together in Ruth's living room, warmed by the soft glow of the Starlink connection humming in the corner, walls began to fall. Tears, apologies, and laughter mingled in a healing embrace. Michael admitted his own fears and failings, his voice breaking as he thanked Ruth for reaching out and never giving up on them. Ruth realized that breaking through wasn't just about technology or public recognition, it was about mending the heart's deepest wounds. With her son's presence came renewed hope for rebuilding family ties. They planned visits, video calls, and shared stories once lost to time. Ruth's grandchildren, once distant faces on a screen, became lively participants in her daily life, their laughter filling the empty rooms with warmth. The distance that had seemed insurmountable began to shrink with each connection made possible by the technology Elon Musk's vision had delivered. But Ruth's breakthrough extended beyond her own home. Inspired by her story, the town rallied around the Starlink project with new energy. Local leaders pushed for better access, and neighbors helped each other learn the technology, turning frustration into collaboration. The community center blossomed into a hub for learning, sharing, and connection. Seniors who had once felt isolated now taught each other how to use devices, join video calls, and navigate the digital world. Ruth led workshops, her patience and empathy making her a natural teacher. The change rippled outward, transforming lives one connection at a time. Yet, amid the triumph, Ruth remained deeply human, vulnerable and raw. One afternoon, while preparing for a talk at a senior center, she felt a wave of anxiety crash over her. Doubts crept in like old ghosts. Who am I to inspire others? What if I fail? But then she remembered Elon Musk's words about fear and persistence. When something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor. With that thought, she stepped onto the stage, greeted by warm smiles and eager eyes. Her voice, though shaking at first, grew strong as she shared her story. The struggles, the breakthroughs, and the unyielding hope that fueled her journey. The audience responded with applause, some wiping tears, others nodding in understanding. Ruth saw herself in their faces, the same fears, the same hopes. She realized that breaking through wasn't a one-time moment but a continuous journey of courage, connection, and resilience. One evening, Ruth sat on her porch, the Starlink dish quietly humming beside her. The sky above was clear, stars shimmering like distant promises. She thought about the path she had traveled, from isolation to connection, from fear to empowerment. The journey had been filled with setbacks and triumphs, doubts and breakthroughs, but through it all, she had discovered a truth that transcended technology: the power to change lies within each of us, no matter our age. The quiet hum of the dish was a reminder of that power, a symbol of a future where no one would be left behind, where connection bridged not only geography but the divides of age and fear. Ruth smiled, feeling a deep peace settle in her heart. She was no longer invisible. She was a woman who had broken through the barriers of isolation and doubt, shining a light for others to follow. In that moment, Ruth whispered to the stars, "Thank you for the chance to live again. This is just the beginning." Ruth sat quietly in her favorite chair, the soft glow of the evening sun filtering through the curtains and casting warm light on the room filled with memories. The Starlink dish outside hummed gently, a constant reminder of the journey she had traveled, from isolation to connection, from fear to empowerment. She reflected on how different her life was now, how the once heavy weight of loneliness and invisibility had been lifted by the simple act of daring to change. The viral blog posts, the reconciled relationships, the new community she helped build, all felt like pieces of a new legacy unfolding before her eyes. She realized that she was not just living for herself anymore. She was living to inspire others to believe that age was never a barrier to purpose or meaning. The legacy Ruth was building was not about fame or accolades but about the ripples of hope spreading through her town and beyond. She thought about the seniors who had started their own blogs, joined video calls, and dared to learn new skills because she had shown them it was possible. The Starlink internet, once just a piece of technology, had become a lifeline, a bridge connecting people who had felt forgotten. Ruth knew that this legacy was bigger than her. It was about changing a mindset, about creating a future where no one would have to feel left behind because of age or circumstance. One afternoon, Ruth received a letter that deeply moved her. It was from a woman named Linda, living hundreds of miles away in a small rural town. Linda wrote about how Ruth's story had given her the courage to sign up for Starlink and start a local tech support group for seniors. She described the joy of hearing her grandchildren's voices clearly for the first time and the empowerment that came from mastering new technology. Linda's letter was filled with gratitude and hope, a testament to the impact one person's courage could have across distances and generations. Ruth placed the letter carefully on her desk, feeling the profound truth that her journey had become a beacon for many. In the quiet moments, Ruth often thought about Elon Musk, the visionary whose boldness had sparked her transformation. She understood that Musk's story was about more than rockets and internet satellites. It was about refusing to accept limitations, about dreaming boldly and acting fearlessly. Ruth carried that spirit within her now. She saw herself as a quiet rebel, pushing against the societal expectations that told her to fade away quietly. Instead, she chose to shine, to connect, and to matter. Her son Michael had become a steadfast presence in her life, their relationship growing stronger with each shared moment. Together, they worked on a project to bring more Starlink access points to underserved areas in their region. Michael, inspired by his mother's resilience, found new respect and admiration for her. Their partnership was a symbol of healing and hope, a testament to what was possible when barriers were broken down by love and determination. Ruth also took time to mentor younger volunteers who joined the community tech programs. She shared her story openly, encouraging them to see aging not as an end but as a new beginning full of possibilities. Her workshops were filled with laughter, questions, and the shared thrill of discovery. Ruth saw in these moments the seeds of a legacy that would outlast her, a community united by courage, connection, and the relentless pursuit of growth. One crisp autumn evening, the town held a celebration to honor the progress made through the Starlink project and the community's collective effort to embrace change. Ruth was invited to speak, standing before a crowd of faces glowing with pride and hope. She spoke not as a hero but as one among many who had dared to dream and act. Her words echoed through the hall, "We are never too old to change, to connect, to create. Our legacy is not what we leave behind but what we build together, every day." The applause was warm and heartfelt, but what moved Ruth most was the smiles and tears of those around her, faces transformed by possibility and the courage to embrace the future. The legacy she had helped shape was alive in every story shared, every new connection made, and every barrier broken. That night, as she returned home, Ruth looked up at the sky, the stars shimmering like distant promises. She felt a deep peace and a fierce joy. Her life had been rewritten, not by grand gestures but by small, persistent choices fueled by hope and courage. The Starlink satellites above were more than machines, they were symbols of a new era where connection was a right, not a privilege, and where every person, no matter their age, had the power to shape their story. Ruth whispered softly, "I was never too old. I was just waiting for permission to matter again." And in that truth, she found the greatest legacy of all, the legacy of living fully, boldly, and connected. Ruth's transformation had become a catalyst not just in her own life but throughout the entire community, sending ripples that touched places and people she had never imagined. The town that once seemed small and forgotten began to pulse with renewed energy and purpose. Where silence and isolation had once filled the air, now there were sounds of laughter, lively conversations, and the tapping of keyboards as neighbors connected with family and friends far away. The Starlink satellites above were no longer just pieces of technology but the invisible threads weaving a tapestry of connection and hope across the landscape. Ruth watched all of this unfold with a quiet pride, knowing that every ripple started with one bold step, her choice to embrace change. Inspired by Ruth's story, others in the community began to take their own steps forward. Harold, a retired carpenter who had always believed technology was beyond him, joined one of Ruth's workshops. With patience and encouragement, he learned how to video chat with his daughter who lived across the country. The first time he saw her face clearly on the screen, tears streamed down his cheeks. For Harold, the internet was not just about information, it was about restoring a vital connection long broken by distance and silence. His story soon inspired others in the community to believe that no matter how old they were, they could learn, adapt, and reconnect. At the local library, a once quiet and underused space was transformed into a vibrant learning center. Volunteers like Ruth helped seniors navigate smartphones, tablets, and computers, breaking down barriers and building confidence. The library staff noticed an increase in attendance and participation from older adults, who came not just to borrow books but to be part of a community that valued their presence and growth. The ripple effect was clear. Technology was becoming a tool of empowerment, and the fear that had once gripped many was slowly melting away. Ruth's blog also continued to grow, attracting readers from across the nation. The comments section became a virtual town square where seniors shared their victories, struggles, and hopes. The stories ranged from those who had found love late in life to others who started businesses or learned new skills, all sparked by the courage to change. Ruth took time to respond to many messages personally, offering encouragement and sharing advice learned from her own journey. The blog was more than a record of transformation, it was a movement that showed aging could be a season of radical reinvention. Schools in the area began inviting Ruth and other community members to speak about the power of resilience and lifelong learning. The young students listened intently as Ruth shared her story, breaking stereotypes about aging and inspiring a new generation to respect and learn from their elders. The conversation sparked empathy and understanding, bridging generational divides and planting seeds of mutual support and collaboration. Meanwhile, Ruth's relationship with her son Michael blossomed into a partnership focused on giving back. Together, they organized efforts to bring Starlink access to neighboring towns still struggling with poor connectivity. Michael used his technical skills, while Ruth provided the heart and community connections needed to build trust and enthusiasm. Their work was a living testament to the power of family and the importance of bridging gaps, not just digital, but emotional and generational. As the ripple effect grew, so did Ruth's sense of purpose. She realized that the changes she had made were not just personal victories but contributions to a larger wave of transformation sweeping across rural America. Communities once resigned to isolation were awakening, fueled by the promise of connection and the courage to defy expectations. One day, Ruth received a call from a nonprofit organization dedicated to senior empowerment. They wanted to collaborate with her to develop a national program that used technology to combat loneliness and promote active aging. Ruth was humbled but excited. This was an opportunity to extend the ripple far beyond her town, reaching seniors in places she could only dream of. She agreed immediately, seeing it as the next chapter in the legacy she was helping to build. Despite the growing demands on her time, Ruth remained grounded in the simple practices that had sparked her transformation. Her daily walks continued, providing moments of quiet reflection and connection with nature. The mornings spent blogging and mentoring kept her rooted in the community that had nurtured her growth. And the evenings with her family reminded her of the power of love and forgiveness to heal and inspire. The ripple effect also brought challenges. Not everyone in the community embraced change with open arms. Some resisted, clinging to old ways and fearing the unknown. Ruth encountered skepticism and criticism, moments when doubt threatened to overshadow hope. But she met these challenges with patience and compassion, understanding that change was a journey that required time, trust, and courage. Her empathy helped bridge divides and build bridges where walls had once stood. One afternoon, while helping a neighbor set up a tablet, Ruth overheard a conversation that underscored the profound impact of the ripples she had set in motion. Two women spoke quietly about how the new technology had changed their lives, allowing them to connect with grandchildren, join virtual church groups, and access health resources they never had before. They spoke with gratitude, describing the Starlink internet as a lifeline that brought light to their days. Ruth smiled quietly, knowing that the ripples of hope she had helped create were touching lives in ways she could never have imagined. As the year turned, Ruth's town became a model for other rural communities seeking to overcome isolation and embrace the future. Delegations visited to learn from the community's success, bringing stories and ideas to share. Ruth found herself speaking not just to seniors but to policymakers and leaders, advocating for greater access and support for rural connectivity. Her voice, once quiet and uncertain, now carried weight and influence. Through it all, Ruth remained humble, remembering the moment when everything changed, when she chose to step forward despite fear and doubt. That choice had sparked a ripple effect that transformed not only her life but the lives of countless others. She understood now that legacy was not about grand monuments or fame but about the everyday acts of courage and connection that created lasting change. One clear night, Ruth stood outside, looking up at the stars that twinkled above like distant promises. The Starlink satellites sailed silently across the sky, carrying with them the hopes and stories of a generation refusing to be left behind. Ruth felt a deep gratitude and joy, knowing that she was part of something much bigger than herself, a movement that honored the past while embracing the future. She whispered to the night sky, "This is just the beginning. Together, we are unstoppable." Ruth woke early, the crisp morning air filling the room as sunlight spilled across her worn quilt. Today was different, the weight of years still rested on her shoulders, but beneath it stirred a quiet excitement. The Starlink dish outside had become a symbol not only of connection but of endless possibility. As she sipped her coffee, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the isolated house on the edge of town to a place where her voice mattered, where her story sparked hope far beyond what she could have imagined. But today, Ruth was ready for a new horizon, a future shaped not just by surviving but by thriving, by daring to dream bigger than she ever had before. The decision had come slowly, like a sunrise breaking through a long night. With each conversation she had with neighbors, family, and new friends, Ruth realized she was no longer content to simply share her story. She wanted to build something lasting, a tangible legacy that would outlive her and continue to empower generations to come. Inspired by Elon Musk's relentless vision and refusal to accept limits, Ruth envisioned a community center, a place where seniors could learn, create, and connect, fueled by the very technology that had transformed her life. Turning her thoughts into action, Ruth began by reaching out to local leaders, nonprofits, and businesses. She shared her vision with passion and clarity, inviting others to join her in creating a hub of empowerment. Some were skeptical, wary of the costs and challenges. Others were inspired, ready to invest time, resources, and energy into the idea. Slowly, a coalition formed, a patchwork of people united by a shared belief that age was not a barrier but a bridge to new opportunities. The community center would be more than a tech lab, it would be a place of creativity, learning, and healing. Workshops would teach digital literacy, yes, but also art, music, storytelling, and physical wellness. It would be a sanctuary where seniors could rediscover forgotten passions, make new friends, and reclaim their sense of purpose. The Starlink connection would ensure that even those in the most remote corners could access the resources and community they needed. Ruth felt a thrill imagining the possibilities, the faces of those who would walk through the doors with hope in their eyes. With the support of Michael and other volunteers, Ruth found an old, unused building at the heart of town. A place that once housed a small store but had long fallen into disrepair. It needed work, but it had soul. Together, they rolled up their sleeves, painting walls, fixing windows, and clearing spaces. The transformation was physical but also deeply symbolic. This building, once forgotten like so many seniors, was being reborn, a testament to resilience and renewal. As construction progressed, Ruth found herself busier than ever, juggling fundraising, planning, and community outreach. There were moments of exhaustion and doubt, but she drew strength from the many stories of courage she had heard along the way. She thought often of Elon Musk's words about perseverance: failure is an option here. If things are not failing, you are not innovating enough. This reminder gave her permission to embrace setbacks as stepping stones rather than barriers. The ribbon-cutting day arrived on a bright spring morning. The community gathered, a sea of smiling faces spanning generations. The mayor spoke of the project's significance, local musicians played uplifting tunes, and Ruth stood at the center, heart swelling with gratitude. When she cut the ribbon, cheers erupted, but the true celebration was in the hope ignited in every heart present. The new community center was more than a building. It was a beacon of possibility, a new horizon for all who walked through its doors. Inside, Ruth led the first workshop, teaching basic computer skills to a group of eager seniors. As she guided their hands over keyboards, she saw faces light up with the thrill of learning, the breaking down of invisible walls. Stories flowed, about lost dreams rekindled, new friendships forming, and the joy of connection made possible by the Starlink internet above. The center became a place where age was honored as wisdom, and growth was embraced as a lifelong journey. Word of the center spread beyond the town's borders, drawing visitors and volunteers from nearby communities. Some came to learn how to replicate the model, others to share their own stories of transformation. Ruth found herself part of a growing network of changemakers, united by a shared commitment to rewrite the narrative of aging. Together, they envisioned a future where no one would have to face the challenges of isolation or invisibility alone. One afternoon, as Ruth sat by the window watching children play outside, Michael joined her with news that stirred excitement. A grant had been approved to expand the center's programs, including telehealth services that would bring medical support directly to seniors through the Starlink connection. This integration of technology and care promised to address not only loneliness but also physical health, empowering seniors to live fuller, healthier lives. Ruth marveled at how far they had come, from a single idea sparked by a viral blog post to a thriving community resource changing lives every day. The ripple effect continued to grow. The town's schools partnered with the center to create intergenerational programs, where students learned from seniors' stories and seniors gained new skills alongside young mentors. Local businesses supported the initiative, recognizing that a connected and empowered community was stronger and more vibrant. The center became a symbol of what was possible when people dared to believe in second chances and new beginnings. Ruth often thought back to the moment she first heard about Elon Musk's Starlink project, a spark that had ignited her own transformation. She knew that the true power of technology lay not in gadgets or satellites but in the human connections it made possible. Her new horizon was not just a place but a promise, that every person, no matter their age or circumstances, could reach beyond limitations and build a life of meaning, purpose, and joy. As the sun set one evening, painting the sky with hues of gold and purple, Ruth stood outside the community center, feeling the steady hum of the Starlink dish overhead. She breathed in the cool air, surrounded by the sounds of laughter and music spilling from within. This was her new horizon, a place of hope, resilience, and endless possibility. And it was just the beginning. She smiled, whispering to herself, "The future is ours to create, no matter our age." Ruth's community center was thriving, but she knew that beyond her small town, many places still struggled with the digital divide, a chasm that separated those with access to technology and those left behind by it. This gap was not just about equipment or infrastructure, it was about opportunity, dignity, and the chance to belong in a world growing ever more connected. Inspired by the success she'd helped create and fueled by Elon Musk's relentless pursuit to bring internet to every corner of America, Ruth felt called to bridge that divide, to reach beyond her community and spark change in places forgotten by progress. The challenge was daunting. Many rural areas faced rugged terrain, aging populations, and a scarcity of resources. Traditional internet providers had little incentive to invest in places with few customers or high installation costs. Starlink satellite technology was a game-changer, offering high-speed internet where cables couldn't reach. But technology alone wasn't enough. Ruth understood that connection required trust, education, and an ongoing commitment to help people use this new resource to improve their lives. With Michael's help, Ruth began reaching out to neighboring towns and counties, sharing the story of her community's transformation and offering to help start similar initiatives. Her phone buzzed with inquiries from local leaders, nonprofits, and curious residents eager for guidance. Together, they brainstormed solutions, training programs, volunteer networks, and partnerships with health providers and schools. Each community brought its own unique needs and challenge. Ruth traveled to some of these places, sometimes driving long hours on winding country roads, often through landscapes she hadn't known existed just beyond her town. She met farmers, retired teachers, small business owners, and caregivers, all carrying stories of resilience and hope, but also frustration and fear of being forgotten. In one town, she met James, a former factory worker whose town had lost its industry and its future. The local library's internet was slow and unreliable, making it impossible for the youth to apply for jobs or schools online. James was determined to bring change, and with Ruth's support, they formed a grassroots group to push for Starlink installations and digital literacy workshops. At community meetings and potlucks, Ruth shared not just information about technology but stories, her own journey from isolation to empowerment, the triumphs and setbacks, the simple power of a connection. She encouraged people to see Starlink not as a gimmick but as a tool to reclaim control over their lives, to stay connected with loved ones, access vital services, and even start new ventures. She reminded them that age was no barrier to learning or dreaming, echoing Musk's ethos of pushing beyond limits. One afternoon, Ruth stood in the town hall of a small community center packed with curious faces. An elderly woman raised her hand, voice trembling, "But what if we don't know how to use these devices? What if it's all too confusing?" Ruth smiled gently, "That's exactly why we're here, to learn together. No one is expected to be perfect from the start. It's about taking one step at a time and knowing you're not alone." The room softened, and hopeful energy filled the space. The grassroots efforts gained momentum. Volunteers trained in digital skills traveled from town to town, helping seniors set up devices, troubleshoot problems, and build confidence. Local businesses saw potential too, partnering to offer discounts on equipment and hosting tech help days. Schools introduced programs to connect students with elders, creating bonds and shared learning. Telehealth services began reaching those with chronic illnesses, bringing doctors and counselors into living rooms through screens that once seemed like futuristic dreams. But the journey was not without obstacles. Some communities faced skepticism, fearing technology would replace human connection rather than enhance it. Others worried about privacy and scams, legitimate concerns in a world of increasing digital threats. Ruth addressed these fears openly, bringing in experts to educate and reassure, promoting safe practices and respectful use. She emphasized that connection was about humanity first and foremost, and technology was just a bridge. As winter approached, Ruth received an invitation to speak at a regional conference on rural connectivity. It was an opportunity to amplify the message, to advocate for policies and investments that would support equitable access to high-speed internet. Standing before a diverse audience of policymakers, activists, and tech leaders, Ruth shared the stories of communities transformed, of lives rekindled, and of a generation refusing to be left behind. She spoke with passion and clarity, calling for a united effort to close the digital divide once and for all. The response was encouraging. Several organizations pledged support for expanding Starlink access, funding training programs, and creating networks of support. Ruth felt a surge of hope, proof that grassroots efforts combined with systemic change could move mountains. She knew the road ahead was long, but every new connection, every story of someone overcoming fear and isolation, was a victory worth fighting for. Back home, Ruth continued to lead by example. She organized monthly video calls bringing together seniors from different towns, creating a virtual community bound by shared experiences and encouragement. These calls became a lifeline, a space to share successes, ask questions, and inspire one another. Ruth marveled at how far they had come, from lonely homes to interconnected lives full of promise. One evening, as she looked out at the stars glimmering overhead, Ruth felt a profound sense of gratitude and determination. The journey to bridge the divide was far from over, but the spark had been lit. Like the satellites silently orbiting Earth, carrying signals across vast distances, the connections they had built carried hope, resilience, and the promise of a future where no one would be left unseen or unheard. She whispered softly, "Together, we can light up the darkest corners." Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Ruth's journey had always been about more than just technology or connectivity. It was about reclaiming something deeper, a sense of purpose, passion, and dreams that time and circumstance had quietly buried. As the community center flourished and Starlink's reach extended, Ruth began to hear stories from seniors rediscovering parts of themselves long forgotten. Some had started writing again, others had picked up instruments gathering dust, and many found joy in learning new skills that opened doors to unexpected opportunities. The ripple effect was now reaching inward, awakening dreams that had been waiting patiently beneath layers of fear, regret, and doubt. Ruth herself had wrestled with her own unfulfilled dreams for years, moments when she wondered if her life story was simply one of missed chances and fading relevance. The Starlink project and her community center gave her a second chance to write a new chapter, but there were still shadows in her past she needed to confront. One afternoon, while sifting through old boxes in the attic, she found a dusty journal filled with sketches and poems she'd written as a young woman. Her heart ached as she read lines full of hope and longing, a reminder of the vibrant spirit she once was and the dreams she'd set aside. That evening, Ruth made a quiet decision: it was time to rekindle her own creative fire. She enrolled in an online creative writing workshop offered through the community center's Starlink connection. The thought of sharing her words with strangers both excited and terrified her, but she knew that growth required stepping beyond comfort zones. The first assignment was simple. Write about a moment when everything changed. Ruth's fingers trembled as she typed, pouring her heart onto the screen, weaving the story of her transformation inspired by Elon Musk's relentless spirit and the power of connection. The response was immediate and uplifting. Her instructor praised her honesty and voice, and classmates offered encouragement that felt like a balm to her soul. Ruth realized that her story was not just her own, it resonated deeply with others, weaving a tapestry of shared struggles and triumphs across generations and geography. This realization ignited a new flame of confidence and purpose within her, and she committed to writing regularly, using her words to inspire and uplift. Meanwhile, other seniors in the community center were also finding ways to rekindle their dreams. Clara, a retired schoolteacher, began painting again, her canvases bursting with color and emotion that surprised even herself. Harold, once hesitant about technology, started a podcast sharing stories of local history and personal memories, connecting listeners near and far. The center became a vibrant incubator of creativity, fueled by the freedom and access that Starlink made possible. Ruth organized an open mic night at the community center, inviting residents to share their art, music, poetry, and stories. The event drew a diverse crowd, from teenagers curious about their elders' experiences to lifelong residents rediscovering the joy of expression. As Ruth listened to voices rise and intertwine in the warm glow of the room, she felt a profound sense of belonging and renewal. It was a celebration not just of talent but of courage, the courage to dream again, to be vulnerable, and to connect through shared humanity. One night after the event, Michael approached Ruth with an idea. He had been working on a digital archive to preserve the stories and creations of the community, using Starlink to make it accessible worldwide. Imagine, he said, a place where people can explore the history, art, and voices of our town anytime, anywhere. It could inspire others and keep our legacy alive. Ruth's eyes sparkled with possibility. Together, they began building the platform, gathering stories, photos, recordings, and artworks, weaving a digital mosaic of their collective journey. The project quickly attracted attention beyond their town. Requests came from other communities eager to create similar archives, eager to celebrate their own histories and dreams. Ruth realized that the rekindling of dreams was not confined to her little corner of America. It was a national awakening, a movement of seniors embracing technology to reclaim their stories and shape their legacies. Amid the creative energy, Ruth found moments of quiet reflection. She often returned to her journal, now filled with new writings and reflections. She wrote about the fears she had faced, the moments she wanted to give up, and the unexpected gifts that came from daring to change. Her words were honest and raw, capturing the complexity of aging with both its losses and gains. She understood now that rekindling dreams was not about ignoring reality but about embracing it fully, with all its challenges and beauty. The Starlink connection continued to be a lifeline, not just for information but for inspiration and community. Virtual book clubs, art classes, and storytelling circles flourished, bringing together people who might otherwise have remained isolated. Ruth marveled at how technology, once a source of intimidation, had become a bridge to creativity and connection, echoing Musk's vision of pushing boundaries and defying limits. As spring blossomed anew, Ruth received an invitation to speak at a national conference on aging and technology. She was nervous but honored, seeing it as an opportunity to share her story and the lessons learned from her community's journey. Standing before a crowd of advocates, innovators, and seniors, Ruth spoke with heartfelt conviction about the power of rekindling dreams at any age, about the courage it took to embrace change, and about the transformative role of connection, both human and digital. Her speech was met with standing ovations and tears, sparking conversations that would ripple far beyond the conference halls. Ruth's message was clear: aging was not a period of decline but a stage ripe with potential, where dreams could be reborn and legacies rewritten. The future belonged to those willing to believe, to learn, and to connect. Back home, the community center buzzed with renewed energy. New workshops were planned, new volunteers joined, and the digital archive grew richer by the day. Ruth felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that the rekindling of dreams was more than a personal journey, it was a shared mission that was lighting the way for countless others. One evening, as she sat by the window watching the stars, Ruth reflected on the journey from isolation to connection, from doubt to empowerment. The Starlink satellites sailed silently overhead, symbols of possibility and change. She whispered to the night sky, "Dreams don't have an expiration date. We are never too old to begin again." And with that, Ruth smiled, ready to write the next chapter of her extraordinary story. Ruth had come a long way from the days when loneliness wrapped around her like a heavy fog, when the silence of her small house echoed with doubts and fears. But no journey was without its storms. Just as the community center blossomed and the Starlink connection wove its invisible threads of hope across towns, challenges began to surface, reminders that transformation required resilience, not just vision. The storms came in many forms: personal struggles, unexpected setbacks, and the harsh realities that life often threw when least expected. Ruth knew that facing these storms head-on was part of the process, that true growth was forged in the fire of adversity. One cold autumn morning, Ruth received news that hit her like a thunderclap. Michael, her steadfast friend and co-creator of the community center's digital archive, had been diagnosed with a serious illness. The words felt surreal, a stark contrast to the hopeful momentum they'd built together. For a moment, Ruth's world trembled, uncertainty clouding her mind. How could she continue without him? Would their shared dreams crumble? The storm of fear and grief threatened to pull her under. But then, as if summoned by necessity, Ruth remembered the resilience she had seen in so many others, people who had faced loss and hardship yet refused to surrender their spark. She thought of Elon Musk's words about embracing failure and fear as fuel for innovation. When something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor. Ruth held on to that truth tightly, feeling it anchor her in the storm. Determined to support Michael and keep their mission alive, Ruth stepped into a new role of leadership and care. She coordinated medical appointments, organized volunteer schedules, and kept the community center running smoothly despite the emotional weight she carried. The community rallied around her, offering support and encouragement that reminded Ruth she was not alone. In that collective strength, she found renewed purpose. At the same time, the center faced financial difficulties. Funding was tighter than ever, and some local businesses pulled back their support amid economic uncertainty. Ruth spent long hours drafting grant proposals, negotiating with donors, and brainstorming creative fundraising ideas. The stress was immense, but she refused to let it dim the light they had kindled. Every setback was met with a determination to find another way forward, a testament to the grit that had carried her this far. The digital archive project also hit technical snags. Unexpected software issues threatened to erase weeks of work, and volunteers struggled to keep up with the increasing demand for training and support. Frustration bubbled beneath the surface, but Ruth's calm presence and steady faith helped the team navigate these challenges. She reminded them that progress was rarely a straight line and that every problem solved was a victory. During these difficult weeks, Ruth often retreated to the quiet comfort of her home, where the Starlink dish hummed softly against the night sky. She found solace in writing, pouring her fears and hopes into the pages of her journal. One entry stood out: "Storms are not the end of the journey but the test of our courage. I am learning to dance in the rain, to trust that the sun will shine again." These words became a mantra, guiding her through dark days and sleepless nights. One particularly challenging evening, Ruth received a call from a young woman named Sarah, a volunteer who had been helping with the outreach programs. Sarah's voice trembled as she shared her own struggles caring for aging parents while balancing work and family. The conversation reminded Ruth of the interconnectedness of their lives, the invisible threads linking generations in a web of care and compassion. They talked for hours, exchanging stories and support, each finding strength in the other's vulnerability. Inspired by this connection, Ruth began organizing support groups at the community center, safe spaces where caregivers and seniors could share their challenges and triumphs. These gatherings quickly became a lifeline for many, fostering empathy and resilience. Ruth witnessed firsthand the power of community to transform pain into purpose and isolation into solidarity. Amid the storms, moments of grace appeared. Michael's treatment progressed better than expected, and his spirit remained unbroken. His determination and courage became a beacon for the community, reminding everyone that hope was a choice. Ruth celebrated small victories: an unexpected donation, a successful workshop, a heartfelt thank you note, that fueled her perseverance. The experience deepened Ruth's understanding of what it meant to truly connect. It wasn't just about technology or programs but about showing up for one another in times of need, about creating a web of support that could withstand life's tempests. She realized that just as Starlink's satellites circled the globe, linking people across distances, human connections could bridge even the deepest divides of pain and fear. One evening, as autumn leaves swirled outside her window, Ruth sat quietly with Michael. They talked about the future, not just the plans for the community center, but their personal hopes and dreams. Michael's eyes shone with gratitude and determination, and Ruth felt a profound sense of peace. Whatever storms lay ahead, they would face them together, strengthened by the bonds they had forged. Ruth's story of resilience began to inspire others beyond her town. Messages poured in from seniors across the country who were facing their own storms. Health struggles, loneliness, financial hardship, but who found hope in Ruth's courage and the community she had built. She responded with words of encouragement and invitations to join the growing network of connected seniors reclaiming their lives. In time, Ruth realized that facing the storm was not a detour but an essential part of the journey. Each challenge deepened her empathy, sharpened her resolve, and enriched the tapestry of her life's work. The storm had tested her, but it had also transformed her, revealing a strength she hadn't known she possessed. As winter settled over the town, Ruth stood outside the community center, the cold air crisp against her skin. Above, the stars shimmered brightly, and the Starlink dish reflected the moonlight like a sentinel watching over their dreams. She breathed deeply, feeling the storm's fury fade into memory, replaced by a quiet confidence. The journey was far from over, but Ruth knew that with courage, connection, and hope, any storm could be weathered. She whispered to the night, "We are stronger than any storm. Together, we rise." The snow had melted, and spring breathed new life into Ruth's town. The community center pulsed with energy, workshops, meetings, and celebrations filled its rooms, each event a testament to the journey they had traveled. But Ruth knew that the work was far from over. The digital divide still yawned wide in many parts of America, and the dream of universal connection required constant tending, new ideas, and bold leadership. Inspired by Elon Musk's relentless push toward innovation and his vision of a future unbound by limits, Ruth felt called to light new paths, not just for her town, but for an entire generation of seniors ready to reclaim their place in the world. She began by launching a mentorship program pairing tech-savvy younger volunteers with seniors eager to learn and grow. The idea was simple but powerful: bridge the generational gap by fostering relationships built on patience, respect, and shared curiosity. The program quickly flourished, with lively sessions where stories and skills flowed freely, laughter echoing through the center's halls. Ruth marveled at how much both sides gained: young people discovering wisdom and resilience, elders embracing new tools and possibilities. One day, a local entrepreneur named David approached Ruth with a proposal. He had been following their work and believed there was an opportunity to expand their impact through a mobile app designed specifically for seniors. The app would offer easy access to digital literacy lessons, community news, health resources, and a platform to share stories and achievements. David's enthusiasm was infectious, and Ruth saw the potential to reach those who couldn't visit the center in person, breaking down barriers of distance and mobility. Together, they assembled a team of volunteers, developers, and designers, many of whom were seniors themselves eager to contribute their insights. The project became a community effort, embodying the spirit of collaboration that had defined Ruth's journey. The app was named Pathways, symbolizing the many routes seniors could take toward connection, learning, and growth. As they developed the app, Ruth insisted on simplicity and accessibility, ensuring it welcomed users of all abilities and experiences. During the app's beta testing, Ruth hosted focus groups where seniors could offer feedback and share their thoughts. One participant, Martha, a retired nurse who had struggled with technology, said, "This feels like someone finally built something just for us. It's not intimidating, it's inviting." That affirmation warmed Ruth's heart and steeled her commitment to making Pathways a success. With Starlink's high-speed internet ensuring reliable connectivity, the app launched to an enthusiastic reception. Messages poured in from seniors across the region, many expressing gratitude for a tool that empowered them to explore, learn, and connect on their own terms. Ruth watched as new friendships blossomed through the app's social features, as users shared photos, stories, and encouragement. The digital world was no longer a place of fear but a canvas for creativity and community. But Ruth's vision didn't stop there. She dreamed of creating local, tech hubs, welcoming spaces equipped with devices, high-speed internet, and friendly volunteers ready to assist seniors in person. These hubs would be safe havens where curiosity was nurtured, questions welcomed, and discovery celebrated. Partnering with libraries, churches, and senior centers, Ruth began laying the groundwork for this next phase, knowing that physical presence was just as vital as digital access. One afternoon, Ruth visited a nearby town where a newly established tech hub was buzzing with activity. She watched as elders learned to video chat with distant family members, explored online art classes, and connected with health providers via telemedicine. The joy and empowerment on their faces filled Ruth with a profound sense of accomplishment and hope. This was what the journey was all about, lighting new paths so others could follow. Ruth also recognized the importance of advocacy in this evolving landscape. She joined forces with state and national organizations pushing for policies that supported digital inclusion for seniors. Through meetings, public speaking engagements, and social media campaigns, Ruth became a powerful voice calling for equitable access, affordable devices, and ongoing education. Her story resonated deeply, inspiring lawmakers and community leaders to prioritize seniors in the digital future. Amid these efforts, Ruth's own life continued to flourish. She balanced leadership with moments of joy, gardening in her backyard, sharing meals with friends, and quiet evenings spent writing. The rekindling of her dreams had blossomed into a full life rich with meaning and connection. The stars above seemed to shine just a bit brighter, their light a reminder of endless possibility. One evening, as Ruth prepared for a webinar on digital inclusion, she paused by her window and gazed upward. The Starlink satellites traced invisible arcs across the sky, symbols of human ingenuity and determination. She smiled, feeling the weight of the journey and the promise of what lay ahead. "This is just the beginning," she whispered, a quiet vow to keep lighting new paths, for herself, her community, and all those waiting to be seen and heard. Ruth often reflected on the power of connection, not just the technological kind enabled by Starlink and Pathways, but the deep, human connections that bridged generations and healed long-held wounds. The mentorship program had become more than a practical initiative, it was a vibrant exchange of stories, wisdom, and hope that brought young and old together in ways neither expected. Watching these relationships flourish, Ruth saw how barriers dissolved and new understanding blossomed. It was a living testament to the idea that growth and learning were lifelong, that every generation had something vital to offer. One afternoon, as the community center filled with the lively hum of conversations and shared laughter, Ruth noticed a group gathered around a table where an older man was showing a young woman how to repair a vintage radio. The scene was a perfect snapshot of what she hoped to nurture: skills passed down, curiosity sparked, and bonds forged. The young woman, Emily, was a college student studying engineering, while the man, George, was a retired electrician with decades of hands-on experience. Their partnership was emblematic of the program's success, bridging knowledge, experience, and enthusiasm. Ruth was struck by the stories that emerged from these connections. Emily shared how George's stories about the early days of electrical work gave her a new appreciation for her studies. George, in turn, was revitalized by Emily's fresh perspective and passion. Both found inspiration in each other's strengths and challenges, breaking the stereotypes that often divide generations. Ruth realized that these bridges were not just about teaching technology but about rediscovering shared humanity. Inspired by these moments, Ruth organized an intergenerational storytelling festival at the community center. The event invited seniors and youth to share stories of hardships, triumphs, family history, dreams, and lessons learned. The festival was more than entertainment, it was a healing and empowering experience that connected hearts across age gaps. The community buzzed with anticipation as participants prepared stories, poems, songs, and art, each piece a thread in the tapestry of their shared identity. On the day of the festival, the center overflowed with people of all ages. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation and warmth. Ruth took the stage to open the event, her voice steady but filled with emotion. She spoke of the importance of listening, of valuing the voices of those who came before and those who would come after. "We are all part of a story bigger than ourselves," she said. "By sharing and listening, we build bridges that last beyond our years." One of the most moving moments came when George recounted a story of his childhood during the Great Depression, weaving in lessons of resilience and hope that resonated deeply with the audience. Emily followed, sharing her dreams of becoming an engineer who designs affordable technology for seniors, inspired by her experiences at the community center. The room erupted in applause, tears mingling with smiles. These stories sparked conversations that continued long after the event, connecting people in new and meaningful ways. The festival also featured a digital storytelling workshop, where seniors learned to record and edit their own stories using the Pathways app. Ruth watched as participants overcame fears and hesitations, discovering new ways to express themselves and preserve their legacies. The workshop became a highlight of the festival, reinforcing the power of technology as a tool for empowerment and connection. Ruth's vision extended beyond her town. She began collaborating with other community leaders across the country, sharing the mentorship model and storytelling initiatives. Together, they formed a network dedicated to fostering intergenerational connection and digital inclusion. Through virtual meetings and shared resources, these communities supported one another, creating a movement that transcended geography and age. At home, Ruth's relationships with younger volunteers deepened. She found joy in simple moments, sharing meals, learning new apps, and exchanging books and music. These friendships enriched her life and challenged her to keep growing, reminding her that change was a constant and a gift. The barriers of age and experience became opportunities for mutual learning and respect. One evening, Ruth received a message from a young woman named Jasmine, who had recently moved to the area. Jasmine expressed gratitude for the mentorship program, sharing how it had helped her reconnect with her grandfather and sparked her interest in community service. Ruth replied with warmth, inviting Jasmine to join the upcoming storytelling festival. This exchange underscored the ripple effect of connection, the way one act of kindness and inclusion could spread far beyond its origin. The bridges Ruth helped build extended to families as well. Many seniors reported improved relationships with their children and grandchildren, who now saw them as vibrant, capable, and engaged. Ruth encouraged family participation in the community center's programs, fostering an environment where generations could celebrate each other's strengths and challenges. These renewed bonds brought healing and joy, transforming the narrative of aging from decline to vitality. As the seasons changed, Ruth reflected on the profound transformations unfolding around her. The community center had become a beacon of hope and connection, a place where age was not a barrier but a bridge. She thought of Elon Musk's bold vision, not just the technology he created but the mindset of pushing boundaries, embracing challenges, and daring to dream. That mindset had sparked a revolution in her own life and in the lives of so many others. One quiet evening, Ruth sat by the window, gazing at the stars above. The Starlink satellites moved silently across the sky, symbols of connection and possibility. She felt a deep gratitude for the journey, from isolation to community, from fear to hope, from fading away to shining bright. Ruth whispered, "We build bridges not just to cross distances but to connect souls. Together, we light the way forward." Ruth had discovered something she never expected, the profound power of voice. Not just the literal ability to speak or be heard, but the deeper, transformative power of telling one's story and claiming space in a world that often overlooked seniors. The Pathways app and the Community Center's Storytelling Festival had opened floodgates of expression, and Ruth saw firsthand how sharing stories healed wounds, sparked empathy, and sparked change. She realized that voice was more than sound, it was identity, agency, and connection. It was the bridge from invisibility to impact. One morning, as sunlight spilled through the windows of the center, Ruth greeted a new arrival named Carl. He was a retired schoolteacher with a quiet demeanor and a lifetime of stories trapped inside. For years, Carl had felt invisible, his years of teaching and wisdom dismissed as relics of the past. But now, encouraged by the supportive environment and the tools offered through Starlink's connectivity, he was ready to find his voice again. Carl joined the digital storytelling workshop with hesitant steps, uncertain if his stories would matter. Ruth paired him with a volunteer named Mia, a college student studying communications. Their sessions were slow but steady, as Mia patiently guided Carl through the app's features while encouraging him to share memories from his decades in education. Over time, Carl's confidence grew, his voice becoming stronger and more vibrant. When Carl's story was published on the Pathways platform, the response was immediate and heartfelt. Former students, colleagues, and strangers reached out, expressing gratitude and admiration. One comment read, "Your lessons shaped my life. Thank you for never giving up on us." Another wrote, "Your story reminds me that every life matters." Carl was overwhelmed by the connection, tears mixing with pride as he realized his voice was powerful and needed. This experience inspired Ruth to launch a campaign called Voices of Experience, aimed at amplifying senior stories across media platforms. She partnered with local radio stations, podcasts, and newspapers to create spaces where seniors could share their wisdom, challenges, and dreams with broader audiences. The campaign celebrated the rich tapestry of lives that often went unheard, shining light on the unique perspectives only time could create. Through this campaign, Ruth met Eleanor, a feisty octogenarian and former civil rights activist. Eleanor's stories of struggle and courage during turbulent times captivated listeners and sparked important conversations about justice, equality, and perseverance. Ruth admired Eleanor's fierce spirit and determination to keep speaking out, proving that age was no barrier to making a difference. The campaign also tackled tough topics often swept under the rug: loneliness, health struggles, ageism, and loss. Ruth encouraged honesty and vulnerability, believing that sharing these realities would break stigma and foster deeper understanding. She heard from seniors who felt less isolated, who found comfort knowing their struggles were shared by others. One powerful story came from James, a widower who described the quiet ache of losing his lifelong partner and the slow, painful process of rebuilding his life. His honesty moved listeners and inspired many to reach out with support and friendship. Ruth realized that the power of voice was not just about being heard but about creating a chorus of empathy and solidarity. The Voices of Experience campaign also embraced creativity. Seniors contributed poems, songs, art, and performances, celebrating the many ways people express their inner lives. Ruth helped organize a virtual talent show where participants showcased their gifts, from soulful singing to heartfelt poetry. The event was a joyful celebration of life's richness, dispelling myths that aging meant fading away. Through all this, Ruth continued to emphasize the connection between voice and technology. Starlink's reliable internet was the backbone enabling seniors to broadcast their stories and connect with audiences near and far. The Pathways app provided a user-friendly platform for creation and sharing. Ruth marveled at how technology, when designed with care and purpose, could empower people to reclaim their narratives and reshape society's view of aging. In quieter moments, Ruth reflected on her own journey. She thought back to the early days of isolation and doubt, to the spark that Elon Musk's vision had ignited in her. She realized that the power of voice was the key to transformation, both personal and collective. When people found their voice, they reclaimed their place in the world and sparked change far beyond themselves. One evening, Ruth hosted a live broadcast featuring several seniors from the campaign. As they shared stories and laughter, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The voices echoed through airwaves and screens, weaving a tapestry of experience, resilience, and hope. The world was listening, and for the first time in a long time, Ruth knew that seniors were being seen and heard as never before. She smiled and whispered to herself, "Our voices are our power. Together, we speak, we rise, we change." Despite the victories and connections Ruth had helped build, there were moments when doubt crept in like a shadow she couldn't quite shake. The world outside still often seemed indifferent, at times even hostile, to the idea that seniors could innovate, lead, and create change. The whispers of "too old," "past their prime," or "not tech-savvy enough" echoed persistently in her mind and in conversations she overheard. Even within her own community, some voices questioned whether their efforts would really matter or last. Ruth knew that every journey toward transformation carried the weight of uncertainty, but she also knew that how one faced doubt could shape the entire course. One afternoon, after a long day of meetings and planning, Ruth sat alone in the community center's quiet library. She stared out the window at the fading daylight, feeling the familiar ache of exhaustion mixed with frustration. A call from her daughter earlier that day had left her unsettled. Her daughter expressed worry that Ruth was pushing too hard, that she should slow down and accept the natural rhythms of aging. "You don't have to prove anything," she had said gently. "It's okay to rest." Those words echoed in Ruth's mind, stirring a deep internal war. Was she being stubborn? Was she chasing impossible dreams? The doubts felt heavy, threatening to extinguish the fire that had carried her this far. But then she remembered a phrase she'd read in one of Elon Musk's interviews: when something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor. The words sparked a flicker of defiance and resolve within her. Ruth realized that doubt was part of the process. A test of courage and conviction. To face it head-on was to choose hope over fear, action over resignation. She decided to share her doubts openly with her mentorship group during their next meeting, hoping vulnerability would forge deeper connections and inspire others facing similar struggles. That evening, as the group gathered around a large oak table, Ruth began to speak from the heart. She confessed the moments when she felt overwhelmed, questioned the impact of their work, and wrestled with the pressure to slow down. Silence filled the room, then one by one, members began to open up about their own fears, the isolation, the sense of invisibility, the challenges of learning new skills. The conversation blossomed into a raw and honest exchange that deepened their bond and renewed their shared commitment. From this conversation emerged a new initiative. Doubt to Drive, a support circle where seniors could safely express fears and uncertainties and find encouragement to keep moving forward. The group met weekly, creating a sanctuary where struggles were met with empathy and solutions were brainstormed collectively. Ruth marveled at the strength born from shared vulnerability, a reminder that doubt need not be a barrier but could become a catalyst. Ruth also confronted doubt on a broader scale through advocacy. She encountered resistance from some policymakers who questioned the allocation of resources for senior digital inclusion, citing budget constraints and competing priorities. At a regional town hall, she faced a skeptical council member who bluntly asked, "Why invest in technology for seniors when younger generations drive innovation?" The question stung, but Ruth responded with calm determination, sharing stories of seniors whose lives had been transformed by connectivity and education, emphasizing the ripple effects for families and communities. Her words struck a chord with many in the room, and the council ultimately voted to expand funding for programs like hers. The victory was bittersweet, a reminder that progress often came in hard-won increments, requiring persistence and resilience. Ruth understood that facing doubt meant continually choosing to stand firm in the face of skepticism and slow change. At home, Ruth's internal dialogue remained a constant companion. Some nights she lay awake wrestling with exhaustion and worry, wondering if she could sustain the momentum. But other nights, she found solace in small joys: a handwritten thank you note from a mentee, a photo shared on pathways of a senior mastering a new skill, a call from a friend reminding her of the difference she was making. These moments fueled her determination, a steady heartbeat beneath the noise of doubt. Ruth also leaned on her own self-care practices, incorporating quiet walks beneath the stars, meditation, and time with nature to center herself. She found strength in the rhythms of life and the wisdom of patience. She remembered Elon Musk's willingness to face failure, to iterate and learn, and embraced the idea that setbacks were part of the path, not the end. One particularly challenging day, when the weight of doubt felt especially heavy, Ruth received an unexpected email from a woman named Clara. Clara was a senior living in a remote rural area where Starlink had recently become available. She wrote about feeling isolated and hopeless until discovering the Pathways app, which had connected her to a local group and renewed her sense of purpose. Clara's words brought tears to Ruth's eyes, proof that even in the darkest moments, the light of connection could reach far and wide. That evening, Ruth shared Clara's story with the Doubt to Drive group, reminding everyone that doubt was a natural part of the journey but did not define their potential. "We are not alone," she said. "Our doubts may be loud, but our dreams are louder. Together, we can turn uncertainty into strength and keep moving forward." As spring blossomed into summer, Ruth felt the doubts soften, not vanish, but lose their power to paralyze. She understood now that courage was not the absence of fear but the choice to act despite it. Each day was a new opportunity to choose hope, to build bridges, to give voice, to light the way. The journey was far from over, but Ruth no longer feared the shadows. She welcomed them as part of the dance, knowing that beyond every doubt lay the promise of transformation and the chance to create a legacy of resilience and connection. Ruth had learned that transformation rarely happened in isolation. The journey to bring connection and purpose to seniors was bigger than any one person, and sometimes the most powerful support came from unexpected allies. She discovered that when hearts and minds aligned, barriers crumbled, and new possibilities emerged. This chapter of her journey was about collaboration, trust, and the magic that happens when diverse people come together for a common cause. It began with a phone call one crisp autumn morning. Ruth answered to hear the enthusiastic voice of Mark, a local high school principal she barely knew. Mark had heard about the Voices of Experience campaign and the mentorship program through a parent and was eager to explore how the school could partner with the community center. He believed that bridging the gap between youth and seniors could enrich students' education and foster empathy in ways textbooks never could. Ruth welcomed the idea, sensing a powerful opportunity. They quickly arranged a meeting, bringing together teachers, students, seniors, and community leaders. The conversation buzzed with energy and ideas, intergenerational projects, joint storytelling events, technology tutoring sessions, and shared community service. Everyone agreed that the connection would benefit both generations, weaving a stronger social fabric. One initiative that emerged was Senior Scholars, a program where seniors would share their life experiences in classrooms, providing historical context and personal insights that brought lessons alive. Ruth met with Eleanor, the civil rights activist, who was eager to speak to students about her work. Eleanor's stories were raw and compelling, challenging young people to think critically about justice and equality. The students responded with thoughtful questions and newfound respect. Meanwhile, students volunteered at the community center, teaching seniors how to use tablets, navigate social media, and even explore coding basics. This role reversal created surprising dynamics. Seniors, once feeling left behind by technology, became eager learners and teachers themselves. The mutual exchange shattered stereotypes and created genuine friendships. Ruth watched as barriers fell away, replaced by curiosity and respect. A highlight came when Mark invited Ruth and several seniors to a school assembly. The event celebrated the launch of a joint digital history project where students and seniors collaborated to document local stories using the Pathways app. The auditorium filled with applause as clips from their work played on screen, memories of wartime sacrifices, community celebrations, and everyday acts of courage. The project deepened the town's sense of identity and pride, reminding everyone that history was not just dates and facts but lived experiences. Beyond education, Ruth found allies in local businesses and nonprofits. A small tech startup offered to donate refurbished laptops to seniors in need, while a library partnered to create monthly tech help sessions. Even a local cafe began hosting intergenerational meetups, providing a welcoming space for conversation and connection. These collaborations multiplied the impact, weaving a web of support that extended far beyond the community center. Ruth also connected with a regional nonprofit focused on rural connectivity. They shared insights about challenges and successes in similar communities, and together, they advocated for expanded Starlink coverage and funding for senior programs. This coalition grew into a powerful voice for digital inclusion and age-friendly policies. Ruth found strength in numbers and solidarity in shared purpose. Yet, not all alliances were easy. Some groups hesitated, unsure about bridging generational divides or investing in senior initiatives. Ruth met resistance from those who viewed seniors as passive or set in their ways. In these moments, patience and persistence were key. Ruth invited skeptics to observe programs, hear stories firsthand, and witness the transformation. Slowly, hearts and minds opened, one conversation at a time. Ruth's own relationships deepened, too. Mia, the young volunteer who helped Carl tell his story, became a close friend and collaborator. They brainstormed ideas for expanding Pathways, making it more accessible and engaging. Mia's fresh perspective challenged Ruth to think differently, blending innovation with experience. Their partnership was a living example of the power of intergenerational collaboration. One winter evening, the community center hosted a celebration honoring all the allies who had joined the journey. The room sparkled with decorations and warmth, voices blending in stories and laughter. Ruth stood before the crowd, humbled and grateful. She spoke of the unexpected power of coming together, of how collaboration had turned dreams into reality. "We are stronger together," she said. "Our differences are our greatest strengths." The applause was thunderous, but Ruth knew the real victory was in the bonds formed, the barriers broken, and the future they were building. She thought of Elon Musk's ethos of bold innovation and fearless teamwork, seeing it reflected in her own community's journey. It was a reminder that no dream was too big and no challenge insurmountable when people united with purpose. As Ruth looked around the room, she saw faces of all ages, seniors beaming with pride, students eager and inspired, volunteers energized by impact. She felt a profound sense of hope, knowing this was only the beginning. The road ahead would have challenges, but with unexpected allies by her side, Ruth was ready to keep pushing forward, lighting the way for others to follow. Ruth's journey had taken her to unexpected places, she had found her voice, faced doubts, and built powerful alliances. Yet, beneath it all, the question lingered: what was the true purpose driving her? For years, she had felt adrift, a shadow of the woman she once was. Now, with every story shared and connection made, she sensed a rekindling of something deeper, a fire that had been smoldering beneath the ashes of time. This chapter of her story was about rediscovering purpose not as an abstract idea but as a living, breathing force that could shape every day. It began on a chilly morning when Ruth sat by her kitchen window, watching the fog lift from the small town below. The scent of fresh coffee mingled with the crisp air, and the quiet hum of life stirred outside. She reached for her journal, a habit she had picked up during the early days of her transformation. Opening to a blank page, she paused, wondering how to capture the swirl of emotions inside her. As she wrote, memories flooded back, of youthful dreams abandoned, of love lost and regained in fragments, of moments when she had felt invisible yet longed to matter. The act of putting pen to paper was itself a reclamation of self, a way to bridge past and present. Ruth realized that purpose was not something distant but woven through the fabric of her experiences, waiting to be recognized and honored. Her phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. It was a message from Clara, the senior in the rural town who had found new life through the Pathways app. Clara's words were simple yet profound: "I'm starting a garden this spring, inspired by your stories. It feels like hope growing in the soil." Ruth smiled, touched by the metaphor. Purpose, she thought, was like a seed, sometimes dormant, sometimes bursting forth, but always alive. Ruth decided to take action. She planned a new project called Seeds of Purpose, inviting seniors to explore and express what gave their lives meaning today. The project combined storytelling, art, and community engagement, encouraging participants to identify their passions and pursue them with intention. It was a way to shift the narrative from aging as loss to aging as opportunity. The first meeting was held in the sunlit room of the community center. Seniors gathered around, some skeptical, others curious, but all open to the possibility of renewal. Ruth shared her own story of rediscovery, setting a tone of honesty and hope. Then, participants were invited to share what purpose meant to them. Answers ranged from volunteering and caregiving to learning new skills and reconnecting with old hobbies. One woman, Martha, spoke of her love for painting, long neglected after her husband's passing. Another, Harold, revealed a dream of writing a memoir. The room filled with energy as people realized their desires were valid and achievable. Ruth guided the group in setting small, attainable goals, emphasizing that purpose was a journey, not a destination. Over the weeks, the Seeds of Purpose project blossomed. Ruth witnessed seniors reclaiming talents and passions with vigor. Martha's paintings brightened the walls of the center, Harold's first chapters took shape on his laptop, and others took up music, gardening, or community activism. The project nurtured not only creativity but a renewed sense of self-worth and joy. The impact extended beyond individuals. Families noticed changes, the sparkle in a grandmother's eye, the enthusiasm of a grandfather sharing his latest project. The community buzzed with stories of transformation, each one a testament to the power of purpose rekindled. Ruth's heart swelled with pride and gratitude, knowing these seeds would grow far beyond the center's walls. Amid this flourishing, Ruth faced her own challenge, balancing the drive to do more with the need for rest and self-compassion. She learned to listen to her body and spirit, honoring limits without surrendering ambition. This balance became a vital lesson she shared with others, reminding them that purpose included care for oneself as much as care for others. In quiet moments, Ruth reflected on Elon Musk's relentless pursuit of vision, tempered by the reality of human endurance. She admired his courage to push boundaries but recognized her own journey required a different rhythm, steady, mindful, resilient. Purpose was not about racing to the future but embracing the present with all its complexity and grace. One afternoon, Ruth received an invitation to speak at a regional conference on aging and technology. She accepted, seeing it as an opportunity to amplify the message of purpose and possibility. Preparing her speech, she focused on the stories she had witnessed, the seniors who refused to fade away, who used technology not as a barrier but as a bridge, who reclaimed their power through connection and creativity. At the conference, Ruth's words resonated deeply. She spoke with passion and authenticity, weaving together narratives of struggle and triumph. Audience members nodded, some with tears, others with smiles, all moved by the reminder that aging could be a time of growth, meaning, and impact. Ruth felt a profound sense of mission, knowing her voice was reaching beyond her town to inspire others. Returning home, Ruth felt the fire within her burn brighter than ever. Purpose was no longer a vague hope but a living mission, a force that propelled her forward each day. She understood now that purpose was not a grand achievement but a series of small acts infused with intention and love. It was the reason to rise each morning, to reach out, to create, to connect. Her journey was far from over, but Ruth embraced it with open arms. The past no longer held her captive, instead, it was the soil from which new life sprang. She whispered to herself, "I am here. I matter. My purpose is alive." With that, she stepped into the future, not as someone fading away, but as a woman rekindled, ready to shine. Ruth often thought about the ripples that started from a single stone tossed into still water, the way a small act could spread far beyond its origin, touching lives in ways unseen and sometimes unimaginable. The Starlink project had been that stone, the spark that ignited her transformation and the awakening of her community. Now, as she looked back and around, she marveled at the growing waves of change moving outward, reaching places and people she never expected. This chapter of her journey was about witnessing the ripple effect, the expanding impact of connection, courage, and purpose. It began on a cold morning when Ruth received a letter postmarked from a distant city. Inside was a handwritten note from a woman named Linda, a retired teacher who had discovered pathways through a friend. Linda wrote of how the app had helped her reconnect with old classmates, share stories, and even start a virtual book club that brought together seniors from across the country. Her words were filled with gratitude and hope, describing how the digital community had brightened her days and restored her sense of belonging. The letter was a reminder that the reach of their work extended far beyond the boundaries of Ruth's small town. The ripple was growing, crossing state lines, connecting strangers through shared experiences. Ruth shared Linda's letter with her team, sparking a conversation about how to nurture and expand this growing network of seniors embracing technology and each other. Inspired, Ruth and her team began planning a virtual summit, Voices Across America, designed to bring together seniors from diverse backgrounds to share stories, skills, and dreams. The goal was to create a national community of empowerment, breaking down isolation and fostering collaboration. The event was ambitious, but Ruth knew that big change often began with bold ideas and brave steps. Promotion for the summit spread quickly through social media, local news outlets, and word of mouth. Registrations poured in from small towns, big cities, and rural areas, places where seniors often felt disconnected and overlooked. The diversity of participants amazed Ruth: artists, veterans, former teachers, caregivers, entrepreneurs, all united by a desire to share and grow. The summit became a beacon of hope, a gathering of voices that refused to be silenced by age or circumstance. The day of the summit arrived, and Ruth sat before her computer, heart pounding with a mix of excitement and nerves. As participants logged in, the virtual room filled with faces and names, stories ready to be told. The event opened with a keynote speech by Ruth, who shared her own journey and the vision behind Pathways and the Starlink initiative. Her words were met with applause, chat messages flooding the screen with affirmations and gratitude. Throughout the day, breakout sessions sparked lively discussions, on topics like overcoming tech anxiety, starting community projects, lifelong learning, and finding joy in unexpected places. Seniors exchanged tips on gardening, writing memoirs, cooking family recipes, and even launching small businesses. The energy was electric, a testament to the hunger for connection and meaning that transcended geography and generation. One session featured Carl, the retired engineer who had built the small weather station with Mia's help. He spoke about the power of curiosity and lifelong learning, inspiring others to embrace new challenges regardless of age. His story resonated deeply, a reminder that wisdom and innovation could coexist and flourish at any stage of life. As the summit closed, Ruth reflected on the magnitude of what they had created, a vibrant, supportive community spanning the nation. The ripples of connection had grown into waves, reshaping perceptions of aging and opening doors to new possibilities. Ruth felt a profound sense of fulfillment, knowing that what had started as a spark in her small town was lighting fires across the country. The ripple effect extended into Ruth's personal life, too. Her relationships deepened as friends and family witnessed the transformation in her and the community. Even her daughter, once skeptical, began to see the value of Ruth's mission and joined as a volunteer. Their bond strengthened, healed by shared purpose and renewed respect. Ruth's work also caught the attention of regional and national media. Interviews and features highlighted the power of digital inclusion and senior empowerment, spreading the message far and wide. These opportunities allowed Ruth to advocate for policies supporting broadband access, senior education, and community programs, amplifying the ripple's reach into policy and practice. Despite the growing recognition, Ruth remained grounded. She knew that the true measure of success was not fame or accolades but the lives touched and transformed. She continued to meet with seniors, listen to their stories, and support their journeys, remembering that every ripple began with a single connection. One evening, as Ruth walked through the town park, she paused by a small pond, watching the surface shimmer in the fading light. She tossed a pebble into the water and smiled as ripples spread outward. Gentle, persistent, unstoppable. The image captured the essence of her journey and the legacy she hoped to leave, a world where no one was left behind, where every voice mattered, and where the courage to change sparked endless waves of hope. Ruth had come a long way from the quiet woman who once felt invisible, trapped by age and circumstance. Her journey, sparked by a glimpse of Elon Musk's vision and fueled by courage and community, had transformed her life and those around her. Yet, as she looked toward the horizon, she realized there was one last frontier to face, herself. This chapter was about confronting the final barriers, fear, doubt, and the unknown, and stepping boldly into the fullness of her renewed self. It was a crisp spring morning when Ruth received an invitation that stirred a complex mix of excitement and anxiety. She had been asked to participate in a panel discussion at a national innovation conference, alongside leaders in technology, aging, and social change. The event was a significant platform, offering an opportunity to share the lessons of her community and the impact of Starlink's digital revolution on seniors. But it also meant stepping out of her comfort zone onto a stage filled with unfamiliar faces and towering expertise. For days, Ruth wrestled with self-doubt. Could she hold her own among innovators and thought leaders? Was her story relevant on such a grand scale? The old voice of invisibility crept back, whispering that she was too old, too inexperienced, too ordinary. But then she recalled Elon Musk's relentless push beyond limits, his refusal to accept impossible as the final word. If he could launch rockets and build electric cars, surely she could speak her truth and shine her light. With renewed resolve, Ruth prepared meticulously. She practiced her speech, anticipating questions, and grounding herself in the stories of those she represented. She reminded herself that her power lay not in credentials but in lived experience and the ability to inspire change through connection. The morning of the panel, she donned a simple blue scarf, her symbol of hope and transformation, and stepped into the spotlight. The conference hall buzzed with energy as Ruth took her seat among renowned experts. The moderator introduced her as a community leader and catalyst for senior empowerment through technology. When it was her turn to speak, Ruth's voice was steady but warm, weaving narratives of struggle and triumph from her town, the seniors she had met, and the ripple effects spreading nationwide. She spoke of the digital divide, the loneliness of aging, and the revolutionary potential of tools like Starlink and Pathways. Her words resonated deeply. Audience members nodded, some wiping tears, others leaning forward with renewed attention. Ruth shared moments of vulnerability, her fears, failures, and breakthroughs, reminding everyone that transformation was a journey filled with challenges but also profound rewards. She concluded with a call to action, to embrace aging as a frontier of possibility and to harness technology to build bridges, not barriers. After the panel, Ruth was approached by innovators, policymakers, and fellow advocates eager to collaborate. Invitations to join advisory boards and speak at other events followed. For the first time, Ruth felt truly recognized not just as a beneficiary of change but as a leader shaping its future. The final frontier she feared was not a barrier but a doorway. Back home, Ruth reflected on the journey that had brought her here, the moments of doubt overcome, the relationships built, the lives touched. She realized that facing the final frontier was an ongoing process of growth and courage. There would always be new challenges, new fears, but also new opportunities to rise. Inspired, Ruth launched a new initiative, Frontiers of Aging, a mentorship program pairing seniors with young innovators to co-create solutions for aging in the digital age. The program embodied everything Ruth had learned, the power of intergenerational collaboration, the importance of purpose, and the limitless potential within each person regardless of age. One of the first ments was Jamie, a tech entrepreneur with a passion for social impact. Jamie's energy and fresh ideas complemented Ruth's wisdom and experience, creating a dynamic partnership. Together, they developed prototype apps designed to enhance senior wellness, accessibility, and community engagement. The process was exhilarating, a fusion of generations working toward a common goal. As the months passed, Frontiers of Aging grew, attracting participants from across the country. The program became a hub of innovation and empathy, challenging stereotypes and redefining what it meant to age in America. Ruth's role evolved from participant to visionary, guiding the next wave of changemakers. Throughout it all, Ruth kept Elon Musk's mindset close, boldness in the face of uncertainty, resilience amid setbacks, and an unwavering belief that limits were meant to be pushed. She had become a living testament to the power of transformation, not just surviving but thriving in the final frontier of life. One evening, sitting on her porch as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ruth smiled quietly to herself. The journey had not been easy, but it had been worth every step. She whispered a silent thanks to the sparks that had ignited her path, the visionaries, the community, and the unyielding spirit within. The final frontier was no longer a fearsome boundary but a vast, open space of possibility. Ruth's story was far from over. The frontier ahead beckoned, filled with challenges and dreams, waiting for her, and others like her, to boldly go where no one had gone before. Ruth woke up to the soft glow of morning light filtering through her curtains, a quiet reminder that every day was a fresh beginning. The journey she had traveled, from feeling invisible and trapped by age to becoming a beacon of hope and change, had brought her here, to a new dawn. This final chapter was about embracing the future with open arms, carrying forward the lessons learned, and inspiring others to do the same. It was a celebration of transformation, resilience, and the limitless potential within every soul, no matter the years lived. As she sipped her coffee, Ruth reflected on the countless lives touched by the ripple that began with a simple idea and the spark of Elon Musk's visionary spirit. Starlink's promise of connection had become a lifeline for many like her, seniors in small towns, cities, and remote corners of America who once felt forgotten. Now, thanks to technology and courage, they were connected, heard, and empowered. Ruth's heart swelled with gratitude and determination to keep the flame burning bright. The community center buzzed with activity as the Seeds of Purpose program celebrated its first anniversary. Seniors gathered, sharing stories, art, music, and laughter, a testament to lives rekindled and purpose rediscovered. Ruth moved through the crowd, greeting friends old and new, each interaction a reminder that transformation was not a solitary path but a shared journey. The room shimmered with vitality and hope, a stark contrast to the loneliness she once knew. Ruth took the stage to speak, her voice steady and warm. She shared the story of their journey, from isolation to connection, from fear to courage, from fading away to shining brightly. She spoke of the power within each person to rewrite their story, to challenge limitations, and to embrace change. Her words were met with applause and tears, a collective affirmation of the new dawn they had created together. After the celebration, Ruth walked outside to the garden she had helped plant, now bursting with vibrant colors and life. The garden was more than just a patch of earth, it was a symbol of growth, resilience, and the beauty that can emerge when nurtured with care. As she tended to the blooms, Ruth felt a deep sense of peace and purpose. She whispered to herself, "This is just the beginning." Her phone chimed with a message from Clara, who had started her garden and reported it was flourishing. Stories like Clara's were the lifeblood of Ruth's mission. Evidence that the ripples of change extended far and wide, transforming not only individuals but entire communities. Ruth knew the work was far from over, there were still many waiting to be reached, many stories yet to be told. That evening, Ruth sat by the window, gazing at the stars. She thought of Elon Musk's dreams of exploring the cosmos, of pushing humanity to new frontiers. His fearless vision had been a catalyst, a reminder that age was no barrier to dreaming big and daring greatly. Ruth felt a kinship with that spirit, a shared refusal to be limited by time or circumstance. She reached for her journal, pen poised to capture the moment. Her words flowed freely, "I was never too old. I was just waiting for permission to matter again. Now, I give myself that permission every day. This new dawn is ours to create, to share, to live fully. The future is bright, and it belongs to all of us." Ruth's story, once marked by silence and doubt, had become a beacon lighting the way for others. She understood now that transformation was not a destination but a continuous unfolding, a dance between hope and action, fear and courage. The new dawn was not just hers, it belonged to every person who dared to believe that change was possible at any age. As the night deepened, Ruth felt a profound sense of connection, to her community, to the past and future, and to the boundless possibilities ahead. She smiled softly, knowing that her journey, like the ripples in the pond, would continue to expand, touching lives in ways she could only imagine. The new dawn was here. And with it came the promise of a life lived fully, a legacy of courage and hope, and the unshakable truth that it is never too late to shine. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?